And so yet another edition in the hidden history of the African American fighting man. So if I were to ask you, who was the first African American naval aviator, would you know who it was? Well, probably you would think that it would be an African American, since I'm giving you the hidden history, but it's not so hidden necessarily in Biloxi and Gulfport, Mississippi. Jesse Leroy Brown was born on this day in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. To be more precise, he was born in Palmer's Crossing, not far from where the Hi-Hat used to be, one of my favorite places in Hattiesburg. Used to party at the Hi-Hat now. Big pink building. Well, I don't know if the Hi-Hat was there when one Jesse Leroy Brown was in fact born, but I do know this. He was a good one, as they would say, and you will find an incredible amount of information about him if you go to the African American Military Museum there in Hattiesburg. You heard me right. There's one right there in Hattiesburg. Military Museum, I might add. It was, let's see, October 13th, 1926, when he was born there in Palmer's Crossing, just south of Hattiesburg. He flew 20 combat missions before his plane crashed in North Korea. He was on a remote mountain there, and his wingman, who happened to be Caucasian, I might add, crashed his plane in an effort to try to save one Jesse L. Brown. Well, he couldn't. Brown died of his wounds despite the efforts of his wingman, Thomas Hudner, Jr. And because Thomas Hudner, Jr. crashed his plane to save the first African-American naval aviator, Hudner received the Medal of Honor. Certainly did. So now you know, if by chance someone asks you about an African-American fighting man, the first naval aviator, Jesse L. Brown. Thought you should know. All right, folks, it's been an incredible week. Incredible week, and I'm gonna fill it up. Trust me on this. I want to first start with something that's happening here in Mississippi. It's happened in other places, but it really hits home in what I would consider the most progressive area of the South, if not Mississippi. Listen, Lakita, is it Lakita Jefferson? Yeah, thank you for tuning us in. Now, just listen to this. There's a little school in Biloxi, Mississippi, who now is, have decided, the administrator has decided to stop allowing its 8th graders to read Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. To Kill a Mockingbird, you guys, you've read this, haven't you, Ro? Was it required reading when you were on? I mean, I don't know whether it's required reading or not, but it should be. It's a classic. I mean, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. I mean, there's an incredible black and white movie that I still find fascinating to read. Whenever it's on, I can't change it. I mean, Gregory Peck is in it, and I can almost quote some of the script of it. But it was probably one of the first racially revealing movies / books I first saw it before I read it as a young boy, and I couldn't wait to read it. It was required, by the way, not that it had to be for me, but it was the first racially revealing. In other words, it was my first movie that actually depicted the South as I saw it growing up in Biloxi, Gulfport, Mississippi. It really was. Harper Lee captured it. The dichotomy of how each group existed and survived in Jim Crow, Mississippi. I mean, down to the point of understanding what poor white trash was. On the other hand, understanding how unjust the judicial system was. And the different nuances among Caucasians between those who had and had not. And I mean, it really was. Actually, conservatives hated To Kill a Mockingbird. No, listen to me. They hated it. I guarantee you it was not required reading before integration. I guarantee you. If it was, it would surprise me. Now, if by chance you were around then, and because I didn't go to, I mean, during segregated times, I didn't go to a white school, is my point. So I wouldn't know. So if you were around and you went to a segregated school, which means that it was over here in Mississippi or anywhere in Mississippi, if you're listening and you went to a segregated school, you're a Caucasian, were you was To Kill a Mockingbird required reading? I'm just curious. Because I can remember in the 7th grade, not the 8th grade, 7th grade, Miss Mildred Tate, my 7th grade, actually science teacher, required it. And I'm just curious. So if by chance you're Caucasian and you were around then, please give me a call. Just use an anonymous. Actually, you don't have to even go on the air. I'm just curious as to whether it was required reading. I'm curious. You know how many times they said the N-word in To Kill a Mockingbird? Take a guess, bro. 105 times? No. It was 48 times. 48 times they used the N-word. Not that necessarily it should not have been used, because at that time, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking 1940s, 50ish, after World War II. The N-word was very, very prevalent, particularly in Caucasian families, not so prevalent in African-American homes, I might add. Just as a hard curve here, so some of you who are listening will know. If a brother, African-American, called another African-American the N-word, it was a fight. No, really. It was not generally accepted. If an African-American called another African-American a black guy, it was a fight. Oh, no. That was unacceptable. If you said someone's hair was nappy, it was a fight. Had a big nose, fight. Because at that time, ladies and gentlemen, there was a certain kind of courtesy you gave. Here's the courtesy. Well, if, quote unquote, the white man is calling me that and you calling me that, that means you must be like a white man. No, really. That was the mindset. If you went into Roosevelt's barbershop and you came out and called someone the N-word, then you're going to have to step outside on the sidewalk on Main Street. I see. So now you the white man now. So I am the nigger and you the white man now. Well, this is what I've been wanting to do to the white man all this time. That was the mindset. By the way, I'm the only one that can use the N-word. And I'm only doing it to dramatize the same way that Harper Lee did it in her book. So I'm just giving you kind of the evolution here. There are those who were around then and you can vouch for what I'm saying. If in fact you said things like, you instead of saying the N-word, you might say the spook. Oh, the spook. Or, no, he didn't say shine. Yeah, he didn't say shine. Let's see, it's gotta help me with this one. There were a few other words that jigaboo, yeah, country. Rather than calling an African American the N-word, you country. And the worst thing you could be is country. When you're country, it implies that you're uncouth, that you don't even know what side of the spoon to use. You know what I mean? You don't normally, don't really, you country, you eat with your fingers and all, And I'm not just talking collard greens and cornbread, because we all did that now. But what I'm saying is that those were the words. So by using the N-word and calling another African American the N-word, what it implied is that you not one too. Well then I'm gonna have to deal with you. So when I heard here, and I'm reading here where in Harper Lee's book To Kill a Mockingbird is going to be, let's see how they put it. Let's see. The administration now has decided to not use it as required reading. Kenny Holloway, vice president of the Biloxi School Board, said there are complaints about it. There is some language in the book that makes people uncomfortable. And we can teach the same lesson with other books, oh, can you? It is still in our library, says Kenny, but we're just not going to have it required. Supposedly there was something complaining about, the local paper, Sun Herald, received an email from a concerned reader who said the decision was made mid-lesson plan that the students will not be allowed to finish reading To Kill a Mockingbird due to the use of the N-word. A word they've never heard before. So we're gonna get into this since it's Friday. I don't use the word. I cringe when anyone uses the word, but especially an African American using the word. Primarily because no matter what you might say it means to you, it doesn't matter. It's what it means to the person you're calling it. That word. One of my first recognitions of the word actually being used to defile someone, it was used to defile my mom. She was the help, you see. And one of the little boys inadvertently let it slip. To which his mom chastised him pretty sternly. I was impressed with that. There was no comfort to my mama, though. You see, during those days when African Americans were called the word, as you'll see in reading this book or watching the movie, you let it, how did you put it? You let it roll off you like water on a duck's back. I always wondered about that. I didn't grow up with ducks. You did? And the water rolls off a duck's back? And you can't hear him telling me that, yeah, ducks secrete oil that... Well, there's oil on all feathers. Chickens are, you don't see water on the chicken's back. I mean, you don't see water on the cat's back. I mean, why don't they say it's like water rolling off of a cat's back? I'm just simply saying. I mean, you know what I mean? Why water off of a duck's back? Does it run off any quicker? Yeah, right. So anyway, folks, in other words, you had to simply take that. I know some of you, as did I, as a young person, go, man, I wouldn't take that. And now they take it every day. Every day, there is this recognition of the N-word. And now you even put it in songs. It really wasn't until, let's see, 1960s when it became a little bit more fashionable to actually come out and let a Caucasian hear you say the N-word, referring to another African American. And it's just long before Richard Pryor. Long before Richard Pryor. I mean, up until that time, you might every once in a while hear Mom's Mabley or maybe Pigmeat Markham. And some of you old timers weigh in on this. Some of you guys might know better than I. The Signified Monkey, was it on that one? I can't remember my first time because it just was not used. Then, of course, Richard Pryor came up with that N-word is crazy, and needless to say, it was Katie bar the doors. It gave permission to literally everyone, especially the CWBs, cool white boys, to use it because Richard used it. And it was almost like giving permission. Of course, Richard realized the error of that way later on in his life before he died. But, so, long story short, that's the history of the N-word. But now, be not misled. It really isn't a word. It actually was a mispronunciation of the word. You see, because of what we now call the Southern drawl and the Caucasian Southerners' inability to pronounce the O sound, it's kind of shortcut. That's what the drawl is. It's kind of a shortcut. You know, they just won't do it. That's why I say yellow, potato, you know, tomato, you know, casino. They just can't get that O. You know, the idea of saying Negro is just too difficult for a person who has a big tar of tobacco in the chin and the cheek. You see, that's how you get that talk. That's how all you gotta do is imagine that you got a big wad. You see that roll? You just imagine you got a big wad, and when you say that O sound, it's gonna slip. So you can't do O sounds. You can't do that O sound when you dip it. You say, oh, I'm just. You gotta maintain that. And so if you say, oh, this is gonna come out. Then you can't do that. You just and so that. You see, some of you try to make sense. You try to apply some kind of logic. And you shouldn't. You dignified the ignorance. They couldn't talk. Period. I mean, this whole idea, oh, yeah, well, it's because it's a wretched person and oh, the nigger is this and that. No. This was all about one thing and one thing only. A linguistical laziness and the, let's see, adaptation to the fact that if you pronounce the O sounds in anything, you could spill something. And that would be ill-mannered, bro. You don't want to put that juice down there. Here you are eating your grits, and all of a sudden you got a little snuff in there. People understood it. But don't dignify it by even suggesting it's a word. Oh, it's a word now. Oh, it's a word now. If it is, then, ladies and gentlemen, it's a mispronunciation of negroid. Always a shortcut, you see, in rural America. But I think African Americans dignified it by simply accommodating. And when I read Harper's Lee, there was no accommodation. You will note throughout that entire movie / book, I don't remember one African American referring to the other African American as the N-word. That's pretty significant. Pretty significant. And the one time that it was, well, the 48 times it was used in attachment to another name, of needless to say, of an African American. So the question is whether or not the administrator was in error by banning the book. And if by chance it made some people feel uncomfortable, why? Does it make you feel uncomfortable? Reading about a book that captured attitudes, let's see, in the early 1940s, well, it's kind of after the Depression / World War II, really. I think it's after World War II. It may have been before World War. It may have been after World War I. See if you can get a synopsis of that to see what. Yeah, well, no, there it is, right here. I see it now. 1966. One of the first incidents of the book being challenged. Okay, no, that was when it was challenged. See what? Yeah. So she is. It is depicted in. Yeah, just before World War II, leading up to World War II. Thank you for that. So, anyway, folks, I ask myself, so who feels uncomfortable? And we'll get into it a little bit, just because it's Friday, and without using the N-word, by the way. You don't have to. It's not necessary. I've used it enough. Harper Lee used it enough. Caucasians have used it enough. So, unless you feel like maybe you want to play the part, or maybe if you're holding a big charred tobacco in your cheek, tell you what you do, spit that out before you call me. Because I know you can't pronounce those O's. You know, they're just Filipina, you know, yeah, Latino. All right, I got a lot of stuff to cover, short period of time. If by chance you heard my monologue some time ago regarding inmates and what I perceive as those individuals jumping on the boat to enslavement into the penitentiary, then you need to really hear this Louisiana Parish Sheriff. We're going to play it for you at the bottom of the hour. This guy makes it very, very clear that he's looking to get more prisoners so that they can do more work for free. And if you work for free, what are you now? No, really, what are you? If you're incarcerated, you really want to hear this sheriff justify and really show some, well, he's upset over the mere fact that he's having to give up his cheap labor. These men who had committed a crime and were there, and so he needed them, and we needed more like them because there were some good criminals who go to jail and make good slaves. I mean, some people can't be out here, bro. And he's making it very, very clear he didn't differentiate between Caucasian and African American. I'm going to tell you, but you know, the 13th Amendment applies to abolishes enslavement except in the penal system, which simply means that if you are arrested, if you are in prison, you can be somebody's slave. So for those of you who volunteer to go there, I can only wonder, ask you why. You enjoy that much? All right, you know, what do we do with this guy? You know, Steve Bannon said that there is only a 30% chance that Donald John will finish his term. Steve Bannon, Well, I mean, he just came out and said it. He says a 30% chance that Donald Trump will finish his term. It's 4 years. He obviously knows something that we don't know. I should only hope, though, Steve. You're absolutely positively right. Listen to what this guy said regarding Puerto Rico. We cannot keep FEMA, the military, and the first responders who have been amazing under the most difficult circumstances in PR forever, meaning Puerto Rico forever. It's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks, ladies and gentlemen. And 83 to 85% of the island is still without power. You realize, what is it, the Irma? I think Irma came through there first. What was the last hurricane? I get them mixed up. I mean, I know that was Harvey in Houston, kind of goes together. You had Maria, Irma. You had some other people too. I can't remember all of them. And you can't either. Look at you over there searching. So he says this about an island that is completely destroyed. Everyone has described it. You got a 4-star general there who has said as much. Maria. You know, it almost seems as though the hurricanes were really picking to be, have the names ethnically accurate. I can see Maria in Puerto Rico, not a Harvey. You noticed that? What about a Nate for Mississippi? Nate, yes. You see that, Nate? See, Nate wouldn't go hit Jamaica. It doesn't go in Jamaica. Yeah. So what did Irma? Irma went through the Caribbean. I can see Irma though. I can see Irma in the Caribbean. Irma. You don't see it? What do you think? Irma's a South Carolina thing? Irma, but I can see Irma. It's not Irma May. Irma May would be a Southern thing. Irma, yeah, Irma, yeah, there you go. Hit Florida, yeah. Irma in South Florida. Yeah, come on in here, Irma. And bring that lemonade with you, girl. That sun tea. So we've got a president now who is telling people who are 83% out of power, and everyone else there, the 4-star general, is saying, look, it's not enough. Look, we're not going to be there forever. Now you've got, 3.5 million people on that tiny island who were affected. You know how many were affected in Houston? Just under 250,000. In total, between Houston and Louisiana, averaging around 400, 500,000 people. Now look, you had 40,000 troops who were sent there in the mainland, is my point. It's okay. And they're warning for nothing. Power's back up. Actually, in some cases, power didn't go off. You had high water, but power didn't go off, which surprised me. But here you have 3.5 million people, bro. And this guy is shooting paper towels. He's making hoops with paper towels. I mean, he's swishing with paper towels, and he's going, I got it, 3-pointers. You know, you can't ignore this. It is the most classless, tacky, inhumane, insensitive, utterly downright moronic thing you can do with American citizens. I mean, you don't. It's almost tantamount to everything else he's done. You know, you talk about a gold star parents. They lost their child, and who cares? You talk to a senator, former POW, and say, well, he doesn't matter. He's not really a real hero. This is a prime example. I mean, you shouldn't expect any more than what you're getting from this guy, but for those of you who support him, your turn is coming. This is how this works. You will find people like this. People like this are not to be trusted. I mean, as you've seen with many of the folks he's fired. I'm just going to tell you, he would turn on you in a dime. But there's one other caveat I want to just throw in here. For those of you who support him, do you think that Donald John ever spent a day without his power being on? Ever had to go out and fend for water or ice? Do you think he ever had any kind of concern as to whether or not he'll get his medicine? He probably doesn't need him to. You know, in other words, wonder whether or not, he's going to be able to refrigerate his medicine for diabetes, do you really think he's been inconvenienced to the point whereby he has to go stand in the line for gas? Look, I'm not knocking. This is not a status thing. I'm not criticizing the fact that he was born with a big old silver spoon in his mouth. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just simply saying, how do you expect for him to identify with those of us who know what it's like to be without? He doesn't. In his mind, okay, you pull your bootstraps up and you go for it. Well, guess what? Most of the people in Puerto Rico are doing exactly that. The problem is they don't have as much to work with. And how can you sit up and suggest that somehow or another, oh yeah, well, these are very resilient people. But on the other hand, say, look, you're not doing enough for you. Now let me just tell you what that's all about. That's been the narrative born ever since Ronald Reagan took office. The narrative that if by chance you're not Caucasian, then trust me on this, you're not a hard worker. Oh, this narrative has been put forward, often. You know, so who's that on welfare? And who's that in the war on poverty? Then, of course, needless to say, here comes Willard Mitt Romney. You know, the 42, 43%, whatever. They just want free stuff. That, ladies and gentlemen, is synonymous with everyone else who doesn't have freckles and blue eyes and blonde hair. That's the connotation. And you'll hear that every day on Oxyconservative Talk Radio. You hear it every day. When the reality here is, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the history of these United States, even going back to Harper Lee's book, there's no doubt who's busting their hump, trying to stay afloat. Who's making a whole lot to do with far less. There's no doubt. Trust me. However, that's when you hear Donald John prey on that, even with the Kaepernick thing, that whole thing is putting forward a narrative of particularly African Americans or any of the other O's, you know, those who, Eskimos, Negroes, you know what I mean, Latinos, any other O's. It is always this narrative. Oh, yeah, well, look at them, they just want free stuff. When in reality, and you look at who's on the actual rolls for getting free stuff, it's not mostly African American. And it's not mostly the O's. But be that as it may, any of those individuals who have survived in this country, the O's, particularly the Negroes, have done so in spite of being held back. Now, I don't say that for empathy or sympathy. I say that to describe it. So when you see any African American who is about taking care of his business or own a house there in Moss Point or on Frederick Street, or any of those individuals in Hansborough or D-Lo, or any of those African Americans who were there in Canton before they put the plant up, any of those little Victorian style houses with the spoon siding, the dog under the front porch, and that old fella coming out his overall saying is paid for. Let me tell you about this. That guy worked in spite of the attempt to hold him back. In spite of it. He had to work against his country. Every law that was out there said, no, you're not going to have this. You're not going to derive wealth. And at one time, African Americans in Mississippi, you need to hear this, and at one time, African Americans in Mississippi owned close to half of the acreage in Mississippi after the Civil War. And I'm not talking about just getting in the way of land grants. I'm talking about individuals who came out who were sharecropping, right, after the Civil War, who said, okay, I tell you what, I'll go to the Freedmen's Bank and I will purchase Master's property here. That's how Mount Bayou was born. My family got 40 acres right there in Turkey Creek. It was a land grant. But they had to work it. That's how this works. In spite of the mere fact that Gulfport wasn't there at that time. But there were those individuals who, for whatever reason, their own wretchedness, that and being greedy, felt that at any given time we could take the best land. In other words, at any given time, it's African Americans' warranty deed did not hold muster in court, which is what happened. I'm going to tell you that. By the time Jim Crow came along, much of the land was wasted. But even in the 1900s, 1990s, African Americans were losing acreage by the tens of thousands every month. Now, I was startled by that. That's another show. All right, folks, it's Friday, which means we talk about whatever you want to talk about. For those of you tuning in on live Facebook, that's me. I'm the guy here. I'm in front of a bunch of glass here, which is why I'm wearing my glasses. It's got a little glare there. I gave you a tour here. If you've not seen the studio on Facebook Live, I would highly recommend you pull us up, Facebook Live. You see the guy in the white hat. I know you thought that I was a very tall, dark, heavyweight African-American guy because of my voice. You do too. You couldn't hear Ro just then. Those of you listening on the internet or on the radio would hear Ro. By the way, for those of you who have Facebook who've not been able to pull us up, there's been a snafu with not Facebook, but on iPhone. Where on iPhone, there is a transition, and it's not on our end, it's on their end. iPhone had did an update, and so if you've got the new update, then trust me, we're gonna be back there very soon. But you can go to TuneIn Radio and pull us up that way, by way of JC 94.5. Let's see, what else is on my list of things to tell you? Oh, we're also now on YouTube. You got to subscribe to YouTube. You can pick us up there. You can go there. Now, of course, it's not posted until after I finish doing what I do. So, there you have it. It's Friday. We talk about whatever you want to talk about and a whole lot more. And, yeah, I had someone to weigh in on this whole Boy Scout issue. We'll get to that when we come back.